Good Thursday evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to see you all, or Ohio Gozaimasu, which is, of course, how you say good morning in the state of Ohio. How is everybody this evening? I am, of course, your humble, happy, hirsute, hairy host, Bill Sylvie, bringing you all the straight dope, a classic role playing. Well, as you know, or may not know if you're new to the channel, from time to time we like to bring some folks on and let them talk about their stuff and what they've got going on. And did you miss it, Winter Wolf? Is my audio not work? I'm still seeing it. Well, anyway, hopefully folks can hear me. If you can't hear me, say so. That's a joke. But anyway, what would this channel be without at least a little bit of audio problems? But moving back to what I was saying, I'm going to welcome our guest here. Did not hear the music in the intro. I'll have to look into that. Well, anyway, moving back to what I was saying. We welcome from across the Atlantic a longtime internet buddy of mine. He is a gadfly of AD&D goodness over in the heart of Europe. Please welcome the one, the only, Settembrini. Good evening to you, sir. How the heck are you?
Hello. Good evening. I'm pretty well. I set up my alarm clock so I could make it because it's in the middle of night right now for me. So, but apart from that, I'm feeling fine. How are you?
Good. I'm doing all right. Yeah, you're up. It's wee hours of the morning over there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 1:30 a.m.
Okay, well that's not too bad. That's
No.
I call that prime time. That's when I get most of my thinking done.
Oh yeah, that's if you can afford to do that, it's wonderful. But as we get older, life puts schedules on us that we don't that might not be of our choosing. So, but no, it's great to be on here. It's very exciting. I've never been on a live stream, so looking forward to that. Yeah, hi everyone. Right, hi Winterwolf, hi Jack, and the others.
Yeah. We usually got a pretty good audience sitting out there, but they're kind of quiet. It's sort of a low key affair. But so tell us, what is the buzz right now? What is the big thing making splashes in gaming in your world? Because, like I said before, we're here and we're all about the classic Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes, I'm not entirely sure what you want to hear from me because, of course, over here, as mostly, basically all over the world, Dungeons and Dragons Fifth Edition is the big thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this is in hindsight, this is sort of a revolution because many European markets had their own, their own local champion, and they held out for a long time. Like for an example, in Germany there was das Schwarze Auge, the dark eye.
The dark eye, yes.
Yes, and they used to be the big thing. And I mean, in Hungary there was I don't know what the forgot the name.
I know. I was just trying to think of, because we had Milan on. I'm sorry, Gabor Lux was on.
Yes.
A few months ago, and
Yeah,
he told us all about games from down in the southeast corner.
Kardesche Magira, I think was the name, or in Sweden there was Drakar et Demoner, and so on and so on, and all these local champions that were like the local D&D variants or knockoff products. They got swept away, I think, by Fifth Edition. So Fifth Edition really ruled supreme. But I mean, as you know, we wouldn't be here if that was my interest, right? So we're trying to foster the old school scene, of course, and especially first edition AD&D gaming. And this is what we, as a club or as a group in that club, in that gaming club, try to do. And so yeah,
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So what's you mentioned a real classic there, talking about the Dark Eye. I will not murder your beautiful language by trying to say it in the native tongue. The Dark Eye. You all know what I mean. Just a passerby is like in that. He's represent the Dark Eye.
Yes.
That actually had some real traction, didn't it? I mean, there was a computer game, or at least a couple of computer games, I think, for the Dark
Yes.
Eye. It's one. It that has been on my list of games to look into for a long time. But as you say, the start, that initial spark, that was D&D, and it kind of rolled across the ocean into England, and then of course onto the continent. As a gamer, and now I'm going to go out on a limb here. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm guessing English is not your first language.
No, that's right. Yes.
Okay.
My main language is German. Yes.
Okay. Back in the early days. Now I'm a Gen Xer, born in '70. I'm guessing you probably somewhere in the same neighborhood age-wise. Don't worry, I won't ask you to actually state it. But when you were a kid and you saw role-playing games start showing up, were there, I guess the younger set today will call them localizations, but were there translations, or did you just have to kind of try and plow through and apply your best English as a second language 101 to High Gygaxian back in the day?
Yeah, so this is a little bit more complicated. So the short answer, language-wise, is that there were some German role-playing games, but most of them were just imported in English, right?
Right.
So starting at age 11, 12, once you go beyond the games that were available in every game store, but into the more specialized, the FLG, what we now call the FLGS. Once you set foot into the FLGS, you would need to talk English or start reading English to get in fully into the scene, and that's what I did. So I quickly went from Das Schwarze Auge, so the Dark Eye, went from that to other games like Traveler, and so on, right? And this was all the good stuff was English, so that was a very big help. Starting to get more involved with that language in writing and reading, right? Regarding Gary, this is more convoluted because at the time, when TSR was still around and Gary was still around and his print products were still around, nobody really cared about the German market. So only the German companies or the German game producers tried, once they learned about the big successes of Dungeons and Dragons, they tried to jump on that wagon. What they did was they hired some hobbyists to translate the best-selling item. That was the basic set. I think the Mensa Red Box was the first thing that was commercially translated, but the license was pretty expensive. So TSR was already, it was must have been right around the time Gary was ousted, or Gary was sort of gone. So the Lady of Pain, Lorraine Williams, was already there, and so a lot of money was being. So they asked for a lot of money for the license. So they said, okay, well, we got these hobbyists, and they already translated that, so maybe they should just do their own version, right? And this knockoff version, that was it was what became the Dark Eye. So still another company still offered the translation on the German market. So you had this parallel strand of the basic set, the Red Box era D&D that was translated in German, and the rest was the knockoff, the Dark Eye, that went off to do its own thing, right? That went more into a RuneQuest direction, if I want to be. So that would be the nicest thing that I could say. It was more of the RuneQuest persuasion, right? So you got an attack roll and a parry, and characters got more hit points, and so on, right? So you get the picture, and they were quick to move out of the dungeon. So they did dungeoneering D&D style for 1 or 2 years, and then they started to do other stuff. Okay, but what you had available in German language was, the Mensa stuff, the kiddie stuff, the basic D&D, the back me stuff, and they then tried to then TSR UK tried to jump in on the German market with AD&D first edition products, and I still don't know whom they hired, but they hired somebody who was not a native English speaker, no native German speaker, to do the English to German translation. So the Gygaxian products that were translated, which would have been the DMG, the Player's Handbook First Edition, Monster Manual 1 and Monster Manual 2, and some of the modules like Against the Cult of the Reptile Gods, and a smattering of others later products, right? So they were translated very badly. So a famous example would be Torch. Torch can be, the literal fantasy gaming torch with fire, and but it can also mean, especially in British English, it can mean like a flashlight.
Right, flashlight.
Yes. So it was translated. Torch was translated into flashlight, into the German equivalent, and so on and so on. And you had the Gygaxian sentence structure totally made no sense in the translation they presented. So the first edition books that came out in German in the later 80s, I think 86 or 87, something like that, they made no sense at all. So nobody really could use them. So that was really a dud. So first edition was just a blip on the radar. So what you had D&D wise and was TSR style. You had the German translation of the red box that was sort of working, and the later boxes, and quickly you had second edition AD&D. And when people hear AD&D in Germany, it's still the fact that most think it's second edition. That what you talk about is second edition. And these had good translations. They were well done, and they came with all the Forgotten Realms stuff and so on and so on. So there's very few people who know first edition or who knew first edition in Germany. And one of the big confusions always is that people think, okay, basic D&D was first edition and AD&D was second edition, right? So when they see AD&D second edition, they think Redbox was first edition. So they have many of them have no clue about all the editions, OD&D and basic. It's many internet arguments could be saved and spared if people would be educated differently about that. We try to do that with our club and our activist group, but there's really some funny situations there.
I can imagine. So getting into AD&D, I mean, when I say AD&D, and it's like I said the other night, I mean, I don't know if you catch a show, but it's basically, we had kind of a restatement of faith. And I was like, look, man, I'm here. I'm about first edition. You want me to say something positive about another edition of D&D after AD&D? That's fine. I can find good in most D&Ds that come after. But when you talk about what I love, it's AD&D. So for a guy like you, I mean, you've got Gary's dense prose. And I mean, I think that's a plus. But English is my language of birth. For a guy like you as a young man in Germany in the 80s, I mean, you had a mountain to climb, because it wasn't just getting your hands on the books. It was unpacking the lingo and making it work in your native German. I mean, that, sir, I salute you. That required a real love of the game, and to keep it going now. When here you see in stuff like Stranger Things and Freaks and Geeks and the show called The Goldbergs. I don't know if you heard of that. AD&D, the Monster Manual, the Dungeon Master's Guide, the Player's Handbook cover. Those are the nostalgia touchstones when you say Dungeons and Dragons in the 1980s, but it is completely different, if I'm reading you right, from what you're talking about back in your homeland there. So it has probably taken not just a little bit of effort to keep the fires burning for you guys, right?
Yeah, in a way that's true. In a way, that's it's a reinvention. It's like, so we found some old artifact and now try to make it work. But I know part of the motivation was, if you look at the history of the impact of role playing games into pop culture, then you'll see that the most people who were inspired by Dungeons and Dragons were actually inspired by first edition, right? So that's
Mhm.
where where the creators of Stranger Things, where they made their where they have their reference to the creators of Doom. I mean, Doom is basically a um, high level first edition campaign gone wrong, right, or right, I don't know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean, for those of you out there in the audience, if you haven't read Masters of Doom, it is a guide for understanding how D&D became the most popular first-person shooter ever created. I'm sorry, please continue.
No, you're right. Go ahead. I mean, and many other creators, right? I think Vin Diesel might have been playing second edition, but most others who have references, they've played first edition.
Mhm.
And this is basically the baseline. Even when second edition says something about the olden days, or says something, okay, we changed something from this and that, or the number of hit points, even in fifth edition, right? This all relates to the play experience of first edition, and nothing else. And this
Mhm.
is the baseline. If you really want to understand what's going on, you need to play and engage with first edition, and the creativity in the old school Renaissance, right? So you can see which
Yes.
places on Earth have been exposed to first edition and maybe basic and expert Mulvey Cook play, but those who only had the red box didn't have a big scene, a big OSR scene, because the red box is like it's a fine product, but it's a product. It's not this this artifact that's right on the edge of the poetic and the engineered. I mean, you need the Gary spirit, right? And
Yes.
this was missing in our scene, so we try to push it to show it to people that they that they will, we also have the chance to rub our thoughts against his and create something new, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like I said before, the three core AD&D books really are a conversation that Gary has with players. They're really, particularly the Dungeon Master's Guide, that this is a book where Gary sits down with you and says, here's how we're going to get those players at every turn. I mean, it's like exploring a medieval city unto its own, right? There's no plans, there's no nice even broad avenues where everything's brightly lit and exactly spelled out. If you want to find something, you've got to go down the alleyways, you got to follow all the twisted, convoluted turns through back routes and strange unlit doors and things like that. It's almost an adventure unto itself to really dig your hands into AD&D. And you touched on something, and I think this is another one of those things that we can put on a peg and say there's an important distinction. Second edition AD&D was very much a slick product. Mentor Basic, later bolt-ons for that, were very slick products. But folks, I got to tell you, and maybe I lose a few subscribers from this, but set back me up. Like, the Rules Cyclopedia is about as exciting as a set of fantasy stereo instructions. I mean, it really is. So you're there. You've got AD&D books, which I'm guessing you had to. You mentioned FLGSs. Let's touch on that for a second. Regardless of what was being sold in them, as I recall, in the 80s, and I think it even lasted up to the 90s. It's kind of waned now with the instant gratification of, push a button, receive product from, some Amazon or whoever. But back in the 70s and 80s and even the 90s, the favorite local gaming store was very, very much a part of America, whether you lived in just a sleepy suburban area like I do or a major city. What was the gaming store scene like for you as a kid?
For me as a kid, I was very spoiled, right? I grew up in West Berlin and was like a cultural hotspot, right? So thanks to the Allies for keeping, me and my family safe from the Soviets at the time. But we had a blast, right? So while there was the Cold War raging outside, Berlin had a big old party of Western subsidized socialism, but all the money coming from elsewhere. I mean, it was not nobody was rich, right? So, but there was enough of everything, and there was no restrictions. So that also included not only the electronic music scene or the political scene, but also especially hundreds of subcultures, like early hip hop or as I said, electronic music, big things, but also gaming, right? So we had. So Berlin is very large in geometric terms. So I think it's even larger than Paris, just from the area. So it's very yeah. So it's very separated. So there's many boroughs and districts and precincts, and everybody has his own local identity. But that led to many FLGSs being there. So I think I there were like 10 or 12 that I as a teenager could access to just with a bus, right? With a bus ticket. And there was not like this all over Europe. So that was sort of a special situation. But those were magic places, right? So they were, filled to the brim with weird books. There was one very famous one at the time called Bag's End. So the German version would be Beutel's End, but it was Bag's End before there was called the Weltenbaum, which is the, I guess, the world tree or the world ash, or Yggdrasil basically.
Right.
And that had one of the few stores back then that had imported English language books, right? Not only RPG books, but novels. So before Amazon, where would you get an English language novel, right? So and there you could get all the fantasy and sci-fi you ever wanted. So those were great places. And another one was a gaming store was called Pegasus. That was very close to a famous landmark, a famous conference center in Berlin. That was very nice to get there. Also, there was 2 gaming stores on the main. Sort of like at the time, the West Berlin CBD had there was a street called Kurfürstendamm, and there was at least 2 gaming stores there. That was also very nice, and you had specialized ones that would specialize in certain kind of board games, and you had 2 stores that would only do wargaming stuff, then miniature wargaming, and you had a whole store in the north of Berlin, close to a very famous nervous hospital, that was mainly catering to BattleTech players. So you had very specialized things. I mean, in this day and age would be unthinkable for a store just surviving on BattleTech, but they did back then. So that was sort of like gives you an impression of the scene, I hope.
It really does, and that is so. Nowadays, the only specialized stores when it comes to tabletop gaming, of course, are GW shops, right?
Oh yes, yes, yes.
I mean, otherwise, if you're going to survive as a brick and mortar, you got to have some of everything. You got to have vampire. You got to have a massive set of D&D. Probably got to sell some Games Workshop stuff too. You got to have, but to be in a place in a time when there's just a shop for BattleTech, just a shop for Dungeons and Dragons, just a shop for War Games, that sounds simply phenomenal. What a place that must have been, just to be like, I've got 15, 20 marks burning a hole in my pocket. I think I'll go to the Traveler store today. I think I'll go to God, I envy you. That is fantastic, man. How cool.
Great times, yes. But also a lot of weirdos around there, so yeah. And
that hasn't changed. I mean, Gary put D&D out there and he didn't realize it was magnetized to the weirdo polarity.
Yeah, it was. But at least in our area, it was very mixed. So it was everyone from. I mean, it was more boys, but apart from that, so I myself not fully German descent. I'm from an immigrant background, and many others so were there too. So it was diverse in that sense. Also, also in the more modern sense regarding sexual orientation, I would say there was. I met the first how do you say? Can you say gay? Is this? I hope this isn't a bad word in English, but
no. It's
I mean, homosexuals or diversely oriented, and I met all those also first through role playing contacts, right? And it was, it attracted even at the time at least in Berlin, it attracted all kinds, right? A little less girls. That is, I mean, but I think this has ever since Vampire. I think this has really changed. I think that's worldwide, I guess.
I think you're right. I mean, at the risk of getting demonetized, it's been said that Vampire the Masquerade got more gaming geeks laid in the 1990s than any other thing. I have a funny story. I hope you will think that this is a funny story. We have a dear friend who we met through the student exchange program that my wife's parents hosted for many years. And Julia is her name. I won't dox her completely. Her name's Julia. And she stayed for a year and then wanted to visit back. I mean, she's like family. She's such a wonderful woman. And one day my wife and I went to a huge gaming store here in the Central Florida area, and she had never been to one. I can't recall what part of Germany she's from, but she had never been to a gaming store. My wife and I went. We were roaming around. My wife was looking at miniatures, as you could still buy Dwarven Forge retail at the time. I was looking at Dwarven Forge. She wandered over into the play area of the store and comes back, and she is now she is so tanned you could easily mistake her for being Hispanic or I guess Mediterranean over there. She comes over, she's 3 shades whiter, and is like, "Don't walk off and leave me again." And we're like, "What happened? Did somebody and she's just like, "No, they're all like just creeping on me." We're like, "Oh my God, this is so okay. You can stay with us." So unfortunately, that creep factor has been there, and it's never gone away. So, but again, you talk about a diverse gaming scene, the diverse that everybody likes these days. But if I can put on my sarcastic hat for just a moment, I was told that back in the bad old days that it was just us fat neckbeards who ran role-playing games, and we didn't like that. Was I mistaken? Was I misinformed? Has it in fact been diverse all along? I think perhaps that could be the case.
Well, I think from what I read in the U.S., it seems to be a little slanted toward more slanted toward white middle class than my experience was. But to your point, I would just direct the reader to the Player's Handbook, first edition Player's Handbook forward,
Written by Mike Carr.
By Mike Carr.
Diversity of Players.
Yes, I mean it's the exact term, and contrast that with the Fiendfolio forward by the UK guy. I forgot his name. It's Graham. It's one of the Grahams. No, who was it? I don't know.
Don Turnbull?
Yes, it's him. It's him. It's Don. Don is already fighting a culture war there, right? So he's already making fun of inclusive language, you know. Whereas my car is totally coming from a different perspective. So I would think it. So from a wargaming standpoint, so I'm also a wargamer, as I said in some recent other interview with Trent, the podcast. I'm also a wargamer, and from the wargaming perspective, RPGs, even back in the US, must have been or were recognized as opening up, right? I mean, one of the founding mothers, not a father, of the whole hobby is Lee Gold, right? Who the founder of Alarms at Excursions, and the whole California scene. They brought in many women gamers, and at the time that was all women can come into the wargaming hobby, and that was a big new thing. Regarding your joke about getting laid via vampire, I must say what I learned: the LARPing guys, they had the getting laid thing down even before that. So if you want to get laid, get into a fantasy LARPing. That seemed to be a thing if you wanted to do that.
If that's what you're. Gaming has something to offer everyone, and that I think is probably the less said the better, because we don't want YouTube to reach over and just throw a little knife blade switch in this end abruptly. But
sorry.
No, that's not. No, I'm just saying for me that I won't make the obvious jokes about that. You're fine. You're fine. But again, it sounds like gaming in Berlin in the 80s was just such an awesome scene. Did you have trouble? Well, let me rephrase that. So you were talking about getting into Redbox, or Redbox Basic was the thing, and then 2E came along. Did you go back and dig into AD&D like after the fact, or at that time did you actively seek it out and say, no, there's got to be something that's maybe a little rougher around the edges, but it's got a little bit more teeth to it, a little bit more metal in it?
No, actually, I must disappoint you there. I'm I'm sort of a new convert, right? So these people, there were people that also joined our group and our online campaign, who were back at the day were starting with first edition in English in Berlin. So they did that, and I know some of them knew them through other games. But myself, I really got into first edition AD&D only in 2006. So I mean, it's also 16 years now, so I feel like I can claim I'm a first edition player, but I'm not.
There you go.
I'm not an OG in that regard, right? I'm also a little bit younger than that. But I played second edition at the time, but it wasn't my main game. So my main games were like the GDW stuff. So that was I was always hardcore in that regard, that I wanted to, the GDW stuff, and what you said about doing the work as a teenager, reading English stuff. So that would be mostly in that area, right? So Traveler, Mega Traveler, Twilight 2000, Dark Conspiracy later on, and so on, right?
If I can pause you real quick,
go ahead.
I'm being serious. This is not tongue in cheek. Did Twilight 2000 kind of creep you out at the time? Was that? I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, it's just a game. But were there times as a fan of Twilight 2000, and I mean, I've with what's going on right now, really not a huge distance from you, at least not compared to us over here in the States. I've been a little reluctant to launch extensively into. I don't want the YouTube algorithm to pop up and say, "Oh, well, clearly, if you're talking about the Russians winning, you must be some kind of, disinfo. So we're just going to pull the plug on your channel." But at the time, here's a game very cavalierly talking about Megadeths, and I'm not talking about the heavy metal band either.
Yes.
What was your feeling about it? I'll stop rambling. What was your feeling about it?
Well, at the time, I think let's say, I mean, Twilight 2000 was played in a lot of barracks by GIs, as far as I know, and I think those who played were training a lot and thinking a lot about it, but we're not in a hot war. It was a cold war, right? So, and I think fear of nuclear war, fear of World War III. I mean, in a city, like West Berlin, where, the Soviets were all around, you couldn't avoid that. Either you would really, zone out to try to forget everything, or you would engage with it. I mean, it's sort of a natural thing to do either of those, right? To fully ignore it and go fully into fantasy mode, or you engage with it and get interested into military. And I think back in the day, I mean, you must remember those times too, where the stats of an F-15 or the M1 Abrams battle tank, that was all things that at least many boys were sort of interested in, because today you really don't care about I mean, now you start again to check it out what's going on militarily, because we have to. It's a life and death thing. But at the time, it was a little bit more. So the fear was real, but the actual using of those of that stuff was more distant and more TV or sci-fi, right? But it was not a popular game in Germany, not by any means. But it was for those who like GDW, I guess.
Okay, all right. So you were talking about, like, your first deep dive in role play was, as you say, GDW. Now, the 80s were an interesting time for Games Workshop, which, just for our listeners or viewers, when we say GW, as I will say from here on out, I mean Games Workshop, not to be confused with GDW, Games Designers Workshop.
Yes.
Did you try out any Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay first or second edition?
So we that's the British stuff, right? So as you said, Games Workshop. Yes, that was a big thing. So that was in the Berlin scene. Warhammer Fantasy First Edition was a big thing. Yes, I tried that, but only as a player. I never got my head wrapped around being a DM there, because there was such a heavy emphasis on the published campaigns. There was such a big cultural presence, right? At the End Within and the Doomstones campaign. I think Doomstones actually was a first edition AD&D campaign at some point at start, but it was a big thing. So I dipped my toe into that, but I never made it around being a DM there. I never got into that vibe, and I never got into the British fantasy vibe. So Elric never did anything for me. I tried to read that and so on and so on. But the big cultural stepping stone or touchstone, let's say, a big cultural touchstone for all kids at the time were the Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone fighting fantasy game books. They were all translated.
They were big here in the States too.
Yeah, they were translated and had very nice editions. So they had nicer covers and bigger fonts and very sturdy covers, and very well graphic design, so they look better than the originals. But they kept
Nice.
the illustrations in the pages, so they had a very big impact. So you could get them everywhere at public libraries. That was a big thing, and I think was more influential to what many in Europe think about what an old school experience is than actual first edition play, like let's say the Giant series or Isle of Dread, maybe.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I gotta say, this perhaps we can kind of touch on this for a second. There was a time here in the States, and I'm sure you've heard about it, when in the 80s, a lot of parents had a very gimlet eye view of Dungeons and Dragons, and there's the whole moral panic about it. So for a lot of times, I could grab a copy of Steve Jackson's Sorcery or Starship Traveler or something like that. Walden book's a lot easier than I could pick up a D&D module, and playing the book by oneself was an easier inlet for me, at least. The Warlock of Firetop Mountains, City of Thieves, so on and etc., are just as old school as those classic modules you mentioned, Against the Giants and Reptile God and so on. What was there ever in Europe, at least in Germany, was there ever that moral panic over? I mean, I can't imagine that having a game shop specific to each type of tabletop game, not even tabletop gaming, tabletop game singular, that it was inciting that much moral turpitude. But did you ever even hear of it back in the day? Over in the United States, they think this stuff is a gateway to hell.
Yes. I know about that. The pulling thing and so on. We read all about it, right? This is sort of interesting to us also. When I mean, people. I mean, there are still some religious groups, I think, who try to burn or ban Harry Potter. The Harry Potter books, the children books.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the same strain. And I think most people in Europe look at this with quite some puzzlement. But I've learned that in some rural German areas where there's the Catholic churches is very big, there was some eyes cast upon Dungeons and Dragons or role playing games. But in general, well, especially in northern Germany or in my area for sure, that was unimaginable, right? So I mean that we would all go to in views of those people who banned D&D in the Satanic Panic era. And for them, we all would go to hell. We we had no chance. No, I think there was. I think you need some kind of. I mean, the United States, in a way, if you look at the history of the United States, a big strand of it is, okay, I'll make my own church, my own brand of Protestantism, and and do stuff like that, right? So it plays a very different role than in Europe. But I mean, yeah, but sure, there must have been some areas where there was some people had trouble. But I know more stories about people getting into RPG and at the Boy Scouts, which is usually religious here. Or via their how do you say, the priest, the pastor, or whatever. So in church groups it was played, and I think we had a much bigger backlash and would have much bigger problems with war games. So that was a much bigger problem because of Germany's history, right? So so D&D was just a very safe thing. So there was no stigma attached to that in that sense.
Yeah. Lucky you. lucky you. It's like I said, over here in the States, you had to pat pulling, and I mean, look, I get it. It was a tragedy. You try and find the meaning behind such an awful thing, as self-destruction, and you lash out and you look for anything to latch onto. And, it was just something she couldn't reconcile. But at the same time, again, on this side of the pond, it was very much what are we going to do with these kids? And fortunately, about the time the moral panic began to peak, here came rap music. And so parents stopped rap, heavy metal, and MTV in general. And so we were safe to go off and play D&D again. Now, we've had one of the regular viewers of the show. He might be sitting out in the audience now. Feel free to pop in and say hi on the chat if you're out there. Dungeon Minister. That's not just his YouTube channel.
Oh yeah,
but that's his actual profession. Dungeon Minister has been on the show, and I think I think if the good Lord was afraid of fantasy imagination, he probably wouldn't have inspired Tolkien to essentially invent the modern Western fantasy epic. Am I right?
I don't know about the religious dimension, but if the dungeon minister can pass his judgment there, I would be interested. But
yes. If it's okay with the Padre, I figure I'm in pretty good shape. But so now that we've got you've got a rich, great history, and this is something. I mean, put a dog ear this page, put a bookmark in it, because we're going to come back and we could do 3 hours talking about the gaming scene in your hometown when you were a kid, because that sounds phenomenal. But moving forward, like you said, you got into AD&D early 2000s, first edition AD&D early 2000s, and
that's right.
You've joined the grognards. You're wearing your Napoleonic greatcoat, and you've got your saddlebag full of AD&D books and modules now. So getting into AD&D at that time, I guess it was a definitely an easier entry point. What is the first edition scene like now over yonder?
Well, it has been budding for a little time, and now the first blossoms appear, I would say. So we have what we currently, so not talking about the German scene, let's say. So what we have come up with is a multi-referee campaign that's sort of always on. So we have 5 dungeon masters who all referee. We divided up the Wild Coast, area of the Greyhawk, World of Greyhawk, and then we use the DMG to populate the hexes. So we said, okay, only the what you call it, the gazetteer is canon, and everything else is apocrypha. So we that's our baseline. So everything else we can fill in with what we want to do. So, and every of the 5 original DMs got one city state, let's say. So Elred, Safton, Narwhal, Badwall, Fax, what's its name? And so you get the idea. And there are surrounding areas, and we created a big hex map and divided that up and populated that with the DMG tools and optionally with other tools. So some people wrote their own settlement generation and so on and so on. And what we do is we offer games, and you can use and keep your characters from game to game. So you can move along and play in all of the 5 campaigns, and they sometimes interconnect, and we all cooperate on that. I think some people call it a West Marches style game. So that's what we did, and we have 80 different players with many more characters. Not all of them play all the time, of course. Some drop in, some drop out, but there have been, I think, well over 200 games that have been played in that campaign, and with adjunct campaigns in parallel worlds or something like that, where other DMs can also offer gaming like in the old flail snail days. So they're not so old, but that's the idea, so that you can keep your character and play them in different campaigns. And this has been a very nice success. Then we have a podcast, the Sockback radio podcast, which is also some English content. So we have interviews with Trent Foster Smith, with who else did we have? We had Milan, we had the Prince of Nothing. So we're doing that, but also especially in German language to educate people, right? So we take a lot of lessons from the hip hop culture, each one teach one, to spread the word, to show the skills, to show that our hobby is a unified whole. Like, in hip hop you have graffiti, you have DJing, you have b-boying, you have the emceeing as different elements, and we try to promote that too, right? And we have one thing that is a very good, it has not as much public success, but that it works a lot, itself is crazy. So there's a lot of people. So in the German old school scene, it's all about basic D&D and red box nostalgia, right? Because red box is what people actually have experience with. So most old school people, they dig the old school, the basic D&D variants. And they don't even know that first edition is different, and so on, as I explained. And so we keep saying to people, well, what if you really want to understand, you have to at least engage with first edition, because otherwise you don't really understand how the gaming culture in the US developed and how all those modules are to be understood. Pretty please at least read the Dungeon Master's Guide, right? At least use it as a book. It's the bundled experience of the most experienced OD&D DM, right? So it's Gary. Gary played like 5 years of nonstop OD&D, and his experiences were written down in the DMG. So you have to engage with it, even if you're a basic D&D fan, right? So if you only want to play your OSE, old school emulation, I don't forgot what it is for. Essential,
right, yeah.
Yes. And people, they somehow, they don't want to read the DMG for whatever reason. And so we started as a joke. Okay, so what we're going to do as a club, we're going to have reading sessions, with homework, assigned homework. So
I love it.
Next week it's page 50 to 52, and it started off as a joke, but people kept showing up, and now that's what we're doing. And this week I joined, and we were discussing the finer points of the pummeling and the grappling tables, which actually makes sense. It's a shocking, but they make sense. Just a pain in the ass to calculate the percentages, but once you have the percentages, it plays nicely. Actually, it's Gary.
Yeah, it's I liken the pummeling and grappling tables because we did a whole series on basically how to play first edition AD&D here. You guys can find the playlist over there. And before I forget, speaking of links, over in the private chat, please copy and paste your podcast link. I want to share that with the audience. But yeah, we talked about it, and I liken the pummeling and grappling tables as to a cantankerous car that is really difficult to get started on a cold morning, but once it's running, you can't stop it. It just goes and goes and goes. Once you have the initial percentages, then it's just like, oh yeah, I just roll and I just consult the table and see what happens. It's not as onerous as people make out. But guys, don't misunderstand me. I don't think either Seth or myself is saying that it's elegant, because it's not. Once it gets moving, it is. Getting it started is the hard part.
Yes. And I think it's very impractical, especially with the monsters, to come up with those percentages, and then it totally changes the whole idea of the first edition combat round. This is the thing, right? People love the 10-second combat rounds and their attacks and their misses, and that a roll is one blow. But to understand first edition, you got to let that go, right? You got to be in the modeling mindset. It's this simulation of so 1 minute, and a lot of things happen in 1 minute, and many things make much more sense once you realize, okay, I'm basically playing a game where I'm at the start of the turn saying what I want to do, and then the DM has many tools to coordinate and find out what happens after everybody makes his choice, what he wants to accomplish in that minute, right? So that's sort of, I mean, there's a natural devolution to play in a way. Okay, I make a roll, and this roll is one action, and this is the sort of the Rune Quest way of thinking, or the so what you call it, the Palladium games actually does this very well. I mean, if you really want to do this and stay a little bit more first edition old school, my suggestion is really play Palladium games, Palladium Fantasy, right, with their attacks and their parries and so on, and they do this very well. But first edition does not. But the grappling and pummeling rules, they really do that. I mean, they're really, okay, I have this in this hold, and then I'm doing this counter move. And what we found out at the table is really nice, that a headlock you can counter with eye gouging and so on, right? And so that really makes sense, but it's really blow by blow. And first edition combat 1 minute rounds, it's not blow by blow actually. So that's
no, it's not. It's and my co-host Kyle and I have gone on about this, and I liken the AD&D combat round. I think is perfectly exemplified. And if you haven't seen this, I highly recommend it. It's a great Ridley Scott movie called The Duelists. And it's got Keith Carradine and Harvey Keitel, and they play a couple of French officers who hate each other's guts, and they have this series of famous duels. It's very firmly grounded in history. These were two historical figures who did duel a lot during the Napoleonic Wars and so on, despite being members of the same army. But there's a scene where we come in and they're dueling with cavalry sabers, but they're on foot and they're in the basement of a house. And the scene starts about halfway through and they have sweat pouring off of them. They're bruised, they're bloody, they've got nicks and cuts, and they're exhausted. They're lunging at each other. By the time we join the duel, they're just trying to hit each other with the guard of the sword just to bash the other person unconscious. And that's a perfect example of the AD&D round. It's not stab, wait for you to try to stab me. I mean, you might have a character who only takes 3 points of damage. That might come from, okay, the guy bashed you with the pommel of his sword. He kicked you in the knee. He nicked you a couple of times with the tip of his sword, and you overextended once and then pulled something, you know. It's not this nice, even, perfect little division of your action, my action, your action, my action.
Yeah.
So, so you guys have a hell of a system there. I mean, you're giving coursework to participants.
Yeah, but you know, it was a joke, but now it's happening, I guess.
But if it works, dude, I mean, you know, and it seems to be working absolutely phenomenally well. And you've got a section of Greyhawk mapped out. You've got interlocking campaigns. It sounds like a million moving parts, but they all move in such precision. I mean, you know, it sounds wonderful.
It can be wonderful, but of course, I mean, people being people, of course, there's people dropping in and dropping out, right? And there's DMs who have maybe a dry spell, right, where they say, okay, I really don't have the time right now to offer a weekly game, or where I need some time off of AD&D. But there's always at least 2 or 3 who hold up the banner. So so far it's been chugging along nicely. So
Good. I'm glad. Good.
And I wanted to say we are trying to publish some German language first edition content via our fanzine, which I use as an avatar. That was actually the issue where we had some international support by Jeff Reens and Gabor and so on. And but we have one of the modules that went into the No Art Punk collection actually started out as a German language module, and that will be in the upcoming issue number 9, and number 10 is already planned for. So there will be more German language first edition content coming out there. So that's
That
also
is awesome, man. That is great. I mean, it's I love hearing stories of how folks are keeping classic D&D alive, but over there, I mean, you guys are bringing it to life. It's not like it died on the vine. I mean, this is a whole new thing. I'll tell people, yeah, we play AD&D here, and I think at least here in the States, the base assumption is, oh yeah, so it's you and a bunch of other 50-year-olds who played, they were teenagers in the 1980s and adolescents in the 1980s, and they played, and now you're reaching for past childhood glories. I'm like, no, I actually can run a first edition advanced D&D game and get a bunch of people who never played it before to sit down and play it. And surprise, surprise, they really like it. And it sounds like you've done that, but with an exponent on the end of that sentence. You guys have really created something amazing there. Would you also would you give me the link to the fanzine, and I will put that up on screen so all
yeah,
you
but
guys.
I'll do that. But it's German language, right? So there,
Sure. But
there's
they can look at the pictures and the maps if German's not their first language,
yeah, just
or any language of theirs.
I need to, yeah, at least to that issue. Can
Okay.
shoot you the link. There we go. Yeah, and one must say that I think those people we can reach with our methods, we have reached now, I must say. So it's not like we are still growing very much. So there's few new players here and there, but
Mm-hmm.
I think so. We sort of plateaued at a certain point. So I don't know if what the next steps are that could widen that. So I'm thinking about doing a module writing contest, and maybe get
Mm-hmm.
some of the jurors to be some of the more famous people. So there's people who are more famous in the German scene who are more into the basic old school stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe we can collaborate a little bit more with them. And another thing that we're looking into is doing a live convention, right? So
Excellent.
but as you know, there was this stupid virus going around that made
Mm,
so plans for conventions weren't easy to make. So, but
yeah.
maybe next year could be a good point, and let's see how this will turn out. Yeah, that's one of the
Well,
next steps that we plan to do.
we'll all keep our fingers crossed for you, man, and hope that works out. Yeah, the human malware thing has scuppered a lot of plans. Now, speaking of traveling, obviously not in the last couple of years, but have you been to the States before?
Oh yes, of course. I've relatives in the States, so
Mm-hmm.
they I had relatives in on the East Coast, and now they moved on the West Coast. So I've been, yeah, actually from coast to coast. Once I did a trip by car from coast to coast. So I really love the States, and
Oh,
I try to
great.
visit the game stores when I'm there,
Mm-hmm.
the FLGSs, and there used to be just great gaming stores in the Washington D.C. area. So on the Virginia side of things, like
Yep.
um,
The
there were,
complete strategist.
yes, complete strategists, and I forgot all the names, but there were some very good stores there. And
Now, there was, if I may, and maybe you got there before they closed, but there was the Armory, which
oh,
actually, go
that
ahead.
was that in Virginia?
Yeah, there was an armory in Virginia.
Yes,
There's
I think I've been there.
they uh, they got to where they were making their own paints, their own uh, brushes,
Oh yes.
miniatures,
Mm.
gaming supplies. It was huge. In fact, I can't remember who it was, but a company actually picked up their formula when Armory went out of business, they picked up their formula because Armory Gray Primer for miniatures was regarded as the best for putting on metal minis. I haven't seen it in a long time. I don't know if you can still get it, but yeah, Armory Gray Primer was a thing, and they were up in Virginia. So you got to visit the Armory. That's awesome.
Yes, I think. And then the more recent ones that I saw were on the West Coast, in the Bay Area, and the Valley. So Endgame Oakland was a nice trip, and I forgot the names of some of those, but there was some in the Valley. They were also very interesting, but I think there used to be more, and they used to be bigger. So I mean, Endgame Oakland was doing okay. They're still pretty big, but I think in the 90s there was maybe the best time for FLGSs. Could that be the 1990s?
80s, 90s, I would say. We had a store here in Central Florida. It's gone through a lot of iterations, name changes, location changes. It's kept chugging along. I think it's just kind of on sheer inertia at this point, but it's not a bad place. It's not my favorite shop. My favorite shop, which if you make it to the Central Florida area, you got to let me know, because I'll take you to my favorite local gaming store. Gods and Monsters. I love that place. They've got a bar in the back. I'll buy you a beer. But a proper beer too, I promise. No Budweiser or Corona. But the place I'm talking about was just outside of a huge Navy base that used to exist here. And you'd go there on a Saturday, and I'm telling you, Seth, front door to back wall, right wall, all the way to the left. And the place was big. Nothing but young Navy ratings in their white uniforms, as far as the eye could see. And this was back in the 90s, late 80s and early 90s. And Saturdays, that place was jumping until they closed.
Nice.
So yes, now all that is to say, yes, that was the golden time, the 80s and 90s for gaming stores. Let's see. There is a question for you. Random Internet Hijinks asks, what are the most popular RPGs in Germany now?
Yeah, right now, as we're talking, we know that D&D 5th edition is actually first place. So that was sort of a revolution in the last few years. And second is the Dark Eye, Das Schwarze Auge, in its own 5th edition, which cut off a lot of the old fan base because of a change in short story, or the short version of a long story would be that they cut off the original author. So imagine Ed Greenwood being ousted out of the Forgotten Realms, and now a company that just bought the IP producing stuff, right? So that's sort of the Dark Eyes situation there, and so which leads us directly to number 3, which is probably what's it called? Splittermond, which means splintered moon or moon splinters in English, and this is basically the counter revolution where the old authors created a new game to for the old fans in a way, but this is so this would be probably the most popular games. Other popular games Cthulhu used to be a big thing. They had a big following and their own publications, which would even be sometimes translated back. And another big player in Germany used to be Shadowrun. Shadowrun used to be big, but it's not as big anymore. So yeah, 5th edition, the Dark Eye, as 5th edition D&D, the Dark Eye, Splittermond, and I guess everything else is now fallen by the wayside. Yeah. That answers Hijinks' question.
I hope it does. Someone earlier up in the comments, and I missed this, I scrolled up because I wanted to catch this. What's your take on Cyberpunk 2020? Were you aware of Cyberpunk when it first hit? I think it was just called Cyberpunk when it came out, which was 89, 90, right around then.
Yes. So yeah, that was a big thing in my circles. That was really big. So Berlin was sort of the Berlin gaming scene was sort of divided between Shadowrun people and cyberpunk people, and everybody thought the others were just idiots and munchkins.
Yeah, it was exactly the same here in the States too. People that really liked cyberpunk when it was called cyberpunk, and then it was cyberpunk 2013 and then 2020, were like, man, I don't play that weird Dungeons and Dragons game. That's,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, and the Shadowrun people, they were all like, "Oh, those are the guys with the stick up their ass, right? That's
Yeah,
cyberpunk people, just
exactly. Like, go
arrogant
back to
ass."
reading your William Gibson. We're
Yeah,
over here having fun.
yes. So, and I was part of the Cyberpunk 2020 tribe, right? So
Right.
I think 2013 was a little bit too early for me. So I did catch the 2020 bug, but there was a German version actually. And it was nicely translated, and they were quick with
Excellent.
translating the Chromebooks, right? So I mean, those were the important ones, right? The Chromebooks.
Yeah. Get
Um,
your quarterly dose of new hardware, new toys to hang on
yes.
your
So
runners.
yeah, so we played the hell out of that, but we had a very weird local scene where there was so the DMs, or actually the referees, they 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 had a competition, I mean, not an official one, but an internal competition. Who was the most badass cyberpunk referee? And one of them even would make pencil marks for every killed player character,
Oh
right?
my.
In his basic rule book. So it was really, they were really priding themselves on being the most um, the most evil bastards, right? As referees, and it became. I mean, it was not overly ridiculous because they also wanted to be sort of the smart thinking man's game somehow. I don't know,
Mhm.
and and so they try to play by the rules, but still kill all the PCs. But it became a staple that the most important skill was awareness notice, because there was so often there would be snipers, right? Snipers and IDEs, IEDs that would kill your character. So that was it's after some point it wasn't fun anymore. So
Yeah.
that was. But I used to be big into that. It was,
Yeah, I went through the phase, and again, my co-host and I, we've talked about this. There's really only so many times as a game master you can run the betrayal scenario
yes.
when it's just like, how do you retain any employees? I don't care how big and bad and evil and powerful your megacorp is. If you keep murdering the people that you hire to do jobs, or at the very best, cheating them out of everything you gave them, word's going to get around and people are going to stop working for you.
Yes.
And now the big shocking twist that I've always wanted to run for those games that seemed to desire the game master to put the you go to where the evac helicopter is supposed to be, but it's not there kind of twist in the game, is the other way around. You go to where the evac helicopter is supposed to be, and not only is it there, there's your contact, and he's got a bonus for you.
Yes.
Job well done, guys. Here's a little bit more cash. Thanks for the help. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's the twist now. But Cyberpunk got a little ridiculous, and I don't know what it was like over on the Shadowrun side. I was a BattleTech fan. I
Oh,
actually also I liked what was the other one they did? Renegade Legion. Dabbled with that briefly, and I thought, hey, I'll give Shadowrun a look, and it wasn't really my jam. I'm like, look, I played D&D in middle school and high school. I don't need to play D&D, but with guns now. So
yeah. I only recently tried that out. So we did a podcast episode on Shadowrun, and there we met with some of the old tribe, the other tribe that we used to hate, and we met up with them, and actually, yeah, we started gaming because, and this brings us back to D&D. The very first Shadowrun module. Do you know who wrote that? Dave Arneson.
who
Dave Arneson.
really? Okay.
Yes.
Well, this is my surprised face. I didn't know that. There's a little
Yes.
Did any in the audience? Did you guys know that? I didn't know that. That is fascinating.
Yeah, and it's a pretty well done what they call a lab crawl. So it has underground sections. It has it's a pretty well executed um, modern dungeon crawl, and I think it's fitting for Shadowrun, right? So once I learned, it's really piqued my interest. So we playing through this module. It's DNA DOA. I think isn't it DNA DOA, DNA/DOA, and that's written by Dave Arneson, of course, with the help of somebody. Because I mean,
Sure.
Dave.
Sure, yeah.
I mean,
you said Dave, and I think that says it all right there. But no. Please continue. DNA DOA.
No, yeah. I just wanted to say, right. So I think there's a lot of for an old school person, a lot to learn about or from that, right? To have with all the different technology that you have in Shadowrun, how to still make an interesting dungeon crawl experience, and it's sort of like a high level D&D module in a way. I mean, of course, the trappings are not D&D, but the structure is a dungeon or a complex site-based adventure. And so that's really interesting. But we haven't finished it yet, so I don't know all of it. So there you go.
Well, that might be a good a story we can talk about. On another visit. I would love to do that if you've got the time down the road. You're talking about dungeon complexes in games, and this is something, and I've always felt like this is like, it's game night. I'm not prepared. What do I do? Now, back me up on this set, because I think I'm right. Run a dungeon. It doesn't matter. You want to play Twilight 2000? The Black Madonna module is a dungeon crawl for Twilight 2000. You're literally going into a dungeon filled with monsters, and there's a treasure at the end that you have to get.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the middle act of Star Wars, when they're on the Death Star, it's a dungeon crawl, right?
Yeah, it's definitely in a way, yeah.
So I think it was a smart move by FASA to put a dungeon crawl in. I mean, that's familiar ground.
Yeah.
It's throwing players into an open world and saying, there you go. That can be a little cold. That can leave new players cold. But it sounds like you guys, jumping in with DNA DOA, you at least avoided that pitfall.
Oh, it's definitely worth trying. Yeah. When you say you're not prepared, run a dungeon. How do you? So do you prepare a map then? Because I think I want to have the map and at least the treasure and the monsters, and then maybe I can come up with reasons for those existing on the fly. But I need something to.
If I don't have a map,
yes,
I will take that sample dungeon in the AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide, pick a point on it, just close my eyes and drop my finger and say, that's where the stairs come in.
Mm-hmm.
And right there in the middle of the Dungeon Master's Guide, and I can take 10 or 50, I can just say, guys, give me 10 or 15 minutes.
Yes.
And crack open, just grab my notebook and pen and go to town. Goblins over here, whites are living, or not living, but there's whites down here. There's a pit trap here. Boom, 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 boom. Just with a few rolls on the table, and you got the night's adventure. It's a dungeon crawl, guys. Here's what you have to do. And if you pick starting points in different places or turn the map around, it's like, well, they're going to know what it is. Will they? What if east on the map is now north? What if I turn it this way? Now can the players figure their way through? So that's what I say when I say you can always run a dungeon.
That's true, but you must know your improvisational tools then. So there's Like in music, right? In music, if you like in hip hop, if you do freestyles, right? You can if you can do it, you can do it because you have prepared sentences and you keep thinking about stuff, right? So then you can riff off. But I agree with you in that sense that you know that it will work. You know that it will work if you do a dungeon. If you could do a quickly prepared dungeon, you know it will work because the interaction structure is so clear. And this is a thing of beauty with regards to the hobby of D&D, right? So I would agree there. I like my dungeons a little bit more prepared, but I mean, if 15 minutes, 20 minutes, yes, I can see that. So what I sometimes do when I have to run the weekly game for the club thing, as the joint campaign, sometimes I had to come up. I didn't find the time to properly prepare, so I have to do it on the train. So I have 20 minutes, and this is usually enough to get I don't know, a 20 room layout and roll on some tables to get, and then while I'm walking, think about how this all interrelates, right? So 20 minutes, I would say, is fine. Yeah. But yeah, this is a great idea of using the DMG sample dungeon. I have to remember that.
Well, the game that I've got going now that's been rolling since 2017.
Nice.
I think, yeah, it's 11-person Monday night AD&D game over Discord. Most of my players are out on the West Coast, a few in the middle, and a few here in Florida. And then I think one or two up in the Northeast. But literally started out when we were a 6-person group and a couple of people couldn't make it. And we were at like kind of a nexus point in that D&D game.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, since they can't make it, I do want to play some D&D. You guys take a couple of minutes and roll up some first level characters, and I'll improvise something. I'll come up with something, and we'll just kind of go with it. And that something was using the sample dungeon, the monastery catacombs. And that was 5 years ago, almost 6 now. And that campaign. So sometimes just small things can blossom into into huge things. And now
Definitely.
this party just got done playing S4, Lost Caverns of Sockback. So.
Oh, good for them. So they survived. That's quite an achievement.
They made it out of the Lost Caverns. Not through any lack of me trying otherwise, but yeah, it's just throw a dungeon crawl at them. when in doubt, stick the players in a dungeon. That's my advice. So what you were talking about your AD&D campaign, and campaign with a capital C. You guys run a campaign in the OD&D classical sense of 40 people at this table playing 3 nights a week in Lake Geneva, 40 people at this table playing 5 nights a week in Minneapolis type of campaign. And I salute you guys for that. But along the Wild Coast, you've got a lot of classic module action happening there. You got Cult of the Reptile God is over there. The Slavers series takes place. Do you guys play the classic modules?
Not so much actually. So some of us play more modern OSR things because they're the hype and people want to get into them. And some of us are heavily into DIY, and sometimes this way or the other. So that's what's mostly happening. So I think the most recent modules were DIY for 2 of the referees. One of them, for example, always he doesn't announce the module, but he says, "Okay, who wants to this is a date where we play. Here's a list of rumors. Please tell me one day before game time what kind of group gathers and what they want to do, and then he offers them something. And what they recently did was, and I was part of that. I was just jumping in the last part of it with one of my own characters, which is actually a converted the Dark Eye character, one of my very first ones from way back.
Nice.
Yeah, he allowed that, so he made the conversion. So that was very nice that I can still play this. So and there was one player who played an assassin, and he but he's disguised as a paladin, and we keep making our rolls, right? We have the 2% roll to find out
Right.
if he's an assassin, but no, we all think he's a paladin, so that's really funny. So and he's very good at intrigue, and he tries to change the government in one of the cities, and we helped him. He was always coming up with these stories why this needs to be done, and this guy is evil, and okay, so there it's very player driven. On the other hand, what I did for a while was play through. So I would DM in my area. I would DM forays into a castle, Xintilan, by Gabor Lux, right? His Tiggle Manor, homage, or well, actually, I think he surpassed it. It's very high quality. So, and I think the quality of this book, of this module, you can only fully appreciate once you actually play it. And you can pick it up and directly DM from it. It's just wonderful. It's amazing, and it's so much fun. Players are still raving about it. Yeah, so we played that, and now I'm into one of the first modules I ran was from Gene Weigel's Broken Castle. So I used the Orc-bound part, and another one actually used the castle proper. So that was used, and I think some of the Skirples modules were used by other DMs. What was the name? So no, not so much classic modules, because we sort of assume that most people know them one way or the other, so it wouldn't be too much of a challenge, because that would be too much easy high rewards for players that we don't know, right? So anybody can join, and if they can level their characters very easily with well-known modules, that wouldn't be in the spirit of the project, let's say.
I got you. Too much metagaming. That's always a danger, I think. My Monday night group is an interesting collection of people. Really only a couple of AD&D vets. They've all gamed before, but so few of them are familiar with classic modules. And I tend to throw in a few curves every now and again, like, I know behind this door are 10 orcs guarding a chest. Surprise, it's a troll with no treasure, and he just wants to, eat the party, that kind of thing. But did you ever play that one little module that came out not too long? What was it called? The Lost Crypt. Have you played that one yet?
I think I didn't. No.
That's fine. I'm just teasing you. It's a thing I did with Troll Lord games, or not. Good Lord, Frog God games.
Well, that's one of yours. So I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
That's fine. That's
no,
fine.
no. Okay,
No. You've said enough.
Oh boy, now I screwed up. Oh boy.
No, I'm teasing you. Of course, I'm teasing you. But no, it sounds like you guys are having a lot of fun, and you're definitely picking some great OSR stuff. Now, I will be the first to admit I get dismissive on this show about a lot of the OSR. It gets under my bridge work. But there is a lot of good. I think the OSR, lowercase OSR, the guys who actually love AD&D and are doing AD&D stuff, and to get it out there, it's going through Osric, or it's going through Swords and Wizardry. And stuff like you mentioned, castles in Tillin and so on. Just seeing it getting folded in like that is awesome. And forgive me for using this term because I'm not using it in the sense of what WotC did back in the early 2000s. You were a living Greyhawk campaign. I mean, your campaign is alive. Stuff is happening and things are changing. Now, what do you do when you've got DMs in a collab mode and one of them says, well, I'm going to run Castles in Tillin? Party goes in, they clean the place out. Does that make it just an empty place now for other game masters coming into your campaign setting, or what?
Well, in that specific case, what I did was not I, but I had to adjudicate because the players actually solved the Grail quest. So in Castles in Tillin, you can do forays, you can do delves, you can plunder the place piece by piece, and some people, I think a group of 2 paladins, I mean actual paladins, they started picking up the clues of this Holy Grail subplot that's in there.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually hunted that down. And so my conceit was that Castles in Tillin was an old Souloise, a manor of this old family, the Soult family, which
Right.
were dark rulers of this area with ill-gotten, so they had plantations and so on. So they had ill-gotten wealth from their plantation work and from slavery and so on, and they amassed all these fortunes in that castle and were cursed and so on. That was my conceit, to cite it to embed it into Greyhawk. And once they found the Grail, the curse was lifted and the whole castle was shifted. So it's now gone to somewhere else. So I have left it now open for other DMs. If they want to use it, they can, but they need to restock it somehow, right? Because
Right.
most of it is gone. But apart from that, now that is gone. For other modules, let's say Broken Castle, so there was 2 DMs, me and another guy and me, and the Safeton DM, for the Safeton area, he wanted to use Broken Castle, and I wanted to use Broken Castle, so we divvied it up, right? We said, okay, I use this part, and you use this part, and so we don't cross streams there, right? So this, if somebody uses a published module, so somebody has to call dibs, and then it's his, right? So that's how we do it. Does it answer your question?
That does answer my question. That is that is really, really a fascinating approach. Now I'm a campaign, again, to use that with a capital C for campaign, in the oldest sense. I'm a campaign of 1 guy. That's not an issue with me, but I consider my world of Greyhawk to be a continuation all the way back to, well, really the earliest of 2000s when I got back in AD&D after a hiatus of many years. Mm-hmm. And for me, as a DM, it's been interesting that there are modules that, as I said, my party just finished Lost Caverns of Sockback. Well, all the artifacts there, the Demonomicon, the Daoud's Wondrous Lanthorn, the Prison of Zagging, and all that stuff's gone. Mm-hmm. Whether Drelsna comes back in some form and re-inhabits the dungeon and other monsters come in is one factor, but the things that could be found there, should I ever elect to run it again, because it's part of this living world, it'll be different because players have already been there. But I wouldn't impose on a group, and I'm not saying you guys do. I think you guys do it the right way. Like I would never say, okay, well, you find these caverns up in the Lort Mills or the Yettles. Okay, well, we'll explore them. They're empty. They're just empty. Carved on the wall somewhere is, the Phoenix Adventuring Crew was here common year 571, and then that's the end of it. But that is absolutely something the dungeon masters, I think, can do. I mean, just because a party goes in and empties out a dungeon doesn't mean it's going to stay emptied.
Yes, it can be restocked. That's true.
Monsters will move back in, and then you go to those wondrous tables in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and you find out what they did to change it. You get the frantic villager from back when your party was first level. Hey, do you guys remember when you cleared out that monastery and the crypts below it? Yeah, that place is empty. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
We are once again in danger. So yeah, I think a living campaign like that can really be a lot of fun, because unlike, say, have you played Skyrim or any of the open world Elder Scrolls games?
No, I haven't, but I've heard about them, read about them.
I mean, it's a computer game. It has limitations. You visit a place, you do the big quest, you find the magic item, and from that point forward, it is forever empty.
Mm-hmm.
All the interactivity of the game, you're only ever going to get a few lines of dialogue from the NPCs, and the place where you had the big, awesome fight against, if you're playing Fallout, the killer robot, or the super mutant, or, if you're playing in something like Skyrim or Oblivion, the dungeon you went in and had the big dungeon adventure through, assuming the game doesn't just say, well, that was for the plot. You're not going to be allowed back in there. If you can go back in, it's just empty. And we as tabletop gamers don't have to be knuckled under such conventions.
No, we don't. That's true. Yeah, all sort of things can happen, right?
Exactly.
The strands of causality can wreak havoc among the flaness, and that's the fun of it, right? Yeah, that's
stock up those caves of chaos with bugbears and a green dragon, and watch your players freak out when they think they've got it figured out, folks.
Yeah. So for example, one group drove off the orcs from the orc mount, and then after a while they popped up, settling into one of the empty castles in the area that was created with the DMG method, right? Sometimes you have castles that are empty, and now those orcs showed up, and then they started to interrupt the trade, right? So players started, okay, let's investigate, let's move out, let's try to get rid of those orcs, and so on and so on. It builds upon each other. It's living, as you said. It's interactive, and that's the fun of it, right? And it's what we can do, what a computer game cannot offer. And I think this is so thing worthy to keep alive, because there's so much commercialized and commodified entertainment. There's such big companies that want to get not only your money, but nowadays they want your soul in a way.
You're right.
And I think it's games like AD&D are a way to fight back against that, and I mean, not in an aggressive way, just in a way like, okay, no, this is my free time, this is my fun time. I want to do, I don't want any corporate entity in my fun right now, right? So that's I think that's a very powerful way of doing it, offering such interactive entertainment that nobody can, and doing it for free, just for the sake of it and for the love of it. And guys like you create, you are our our lodestars that or like Trent or Kelly, or you showed us the way how to do it, which text to read, and then we were very thankful for you guys. And back then, before the OSR started, I mean, you were instrumental in fighting the Ostrich fight, right? If I'm not mistaken. And
I was in the room when it was born.
Okay,
I will say that.
Okay, but guys like you, and you were support, and then the Knights and Knaves forum and so on. So we're all very thankful for that, for giving us the inspiration and keeping that that flame alive to do your own thing with Gary's creation, right?
Yeah, no, I was absolutely willing to stick it out there. I mean, and I've told this story before. When I started back in 2002 with my website and my little badly put together, but apparently people liked them a lot, free AD&D modules. I mean, I was, I was doing what nobody else was doing. I was publishing a product for free, admittedly, but that, if Wizards of the Coast had said, yeah, hey, look, we know we're nice and friendly out in the public about people creating their own stuff, but if you don't take these down, we're going to park the Death Star over your house and start pissing for distance, if you know what we mean. Down they would have gone. And while I do express some frustration about the art punk scene of the OSR, and you know what I mean when I say that, I'm sure, I'm glad. It makes me smile to see people going out there. And Osric, the consternation that Wizards of the Coast had over Osric is a story that has to be told by more articulate and glib people than me. But I know what it was, and I know how irritated they were. And to have been a part of that, to have been a catalyst for that, and to get this bounce back, this feedback from you guys, I mean, it's a huge honor for me to watch this blossom into something that has been such a positive influence. Because, like you say, there's no commoditization. There's no sense of, buy the latest shiny, make sure you've upgraded your drivers, and sit back and passively take it in. You got to engage in AD&D. And I think, and I hope what you're finding with it is that is playing AD&D. It's engaging in a tabletop game. No, there's not a skill system. No, there's not feats. No, there's not, just, insta, damaging even if you miss something. It requires a level of player engagement that I think people really find to be a very refreshing breath of air in a time when you might find yourself in that computer game or even in that 5th edition game, and you're like, I want to know what's over there in AD&D. Okay, get out your pythons and your hammer and your rope and climb over that. In a computer game or in some more restrictive RPGs, yeah, no, you can't go over there.
Oh yeah,
You can't do it. Sorry, it's not there. Yeah, I know it might look interesting, but you can't go there. That's out of bounds.
It's really weird how computer games have evolved into that, right? I mean, technology is there to make them more open, but the public expects, many. I mean, the mainstream games they're really weird now. So every item that's important will blink or what, and so on. Yeah, it's astounding.
I was just going to say, pardon me for just a second. My studio lights just shut off for some reason. I've got to switch those back on. Please continue talking.
Okay, I'll continue talking. Yeah. Recently, I was what did I try out? A Thief game, but it was apparently the wrong Thief game. And it was really weird because I thought in Thief I could jump around and so this is like what they call a stealth game, and I thought I could explore the city, but no, I was not allowed to explore the city. There were many alleys that I could look at, but I was not allowed to go there, and that was a really strange experience because why would I play this if every move is preordained by somebody? It's I can't really wrap my head around these games. So and in RPGs you don't have that. Okay, so Bill is he has his lights back on. Yeah. Oh, my imagination is my skill system. I'm just reading that. That's a nice one. Yeah, I found this a lot with third edition play, right? When you enter a room, okay, I search for traps. Okay, make your roll. It's it seems to be more advanced, but in the end, it's a devolvement of the game because you don't actually search for traps anymore. Because yeah, it's better to describe how you do it, right? So I really enjoy that.
Just so. Just so. I mean, it really is. And I apologize for that, by the way, guys. I did not realize that the battery for our studio lights had not been placed on the charger. So my apologies to our guest and to our audience for the dimming of the lights there. It wasn't mood lighting, guys. You don't have to play soft jazz. You know, put away your Jerry Rafferty Baker Street 45s and let's get back to our guest. But no, I find that the puzzle solving aspects of AD&D, I've said this before. I said this last night, and I'll probably say it tomorrow night. You take a module like Tomb of Horrors, a skilled player or a skilled group of players of 6th or 7th level, even without foreknowledge, can make it through the Tomb of Horrors in relatively good shape because it's all puzzles you have to think about. And some of them are so obvious on their face, I don't see how even lower level than that could fall for some of the traps in there. But conversely, you take people who aren't used to the out of the box thinking, like I can't just grab a die and roll to see if I know that the door is trapped. Give them each 2 12th level characters, and I'll have a total party kill before the pizza gets.
Yes.
Cold,
Wasn't that some frustration that one of the regulars at the Knights and Knaves Ale House had just recently? It was a recent thread. Forgot his name. I know how his avatar looks, but he had this relatively big Greyhawk game, and he kept saying that the conditioning of the computer games made it difficult for him to keep DMing that because the players didn't seem to learn, and I think it's a real danger there, right?
I think there is a real danger there. I think you're absolutely right. I feel like I've to go back to my Monday night group. They've learned. The ones that didn't know now know. A dear friend of mine who's been playing in the game now for many years. She was there at the beginning in 2014 when it started.
Mm-hmm.
She has referred to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition as a punitive role-playing game. If you're familiar with the English term, it's a very punishing role-playing game. It punishes inattention. It punishes lack of preparedness. You're all taking a D4 damage each day from the weather. Why? Well, you didn't tell me you were buying cold weather gear. Well, we just assumed that we had it. Guess what? You want to hike back down the mountain and buy some cold weather gear? That's fine. But that's the kind. You can run into people who can either take that in stride and go, next time we're going to pack cold weather gear, let's see if we can kill a couple of deer and a bear and at least try to carry on. Or people who will complain ceaselessly about how awful of a dungeon master you are for being mean.
Yeah. But I must say, I haven't met such. I mean, usually people step up to the challenge, as you said. I haven't. Luckily, have not made the. I didn't have any bad experiences with people who really expect every obvious thing that they are supposed to do to be, blinking basically.
Right.
But I have made the experience, especially with younger guys who are socialized by watching Critical Role or playing a lot of 5th edition that is based on these streaming games or like Critical Role, that they expect to have a large input into the campaign reality. And this is a thing which I have trouble adjusting to. And I'm not yet there that I even want to do that. So for example, I had a player who wanted to try out old school D&D, and he was a nice person, but he, in the middle of the module, when I was describing, well, not the module, but the delve, when I was describing some battle axe in Castle Xintalan, he then kept writing me notes that this would be a perfect axe for his backstory. And he had written like 2-page backstory, and he was a dwarf, and so on and so on. And he really expected and wanted that I include not only his backstory, but to change the situation and the pedigree of the artifacts according to his background, and include this so that he gets his spotlight moment where this is the special acts of his ancestors, and so on and so on. And I couldn't wrap my head around it in several ways, right? Because why would he be then happy? We just declared it to be like this, right? There would be no surprise for him, but he would get to act surprised or satisfied. Do you know what I'm getting at? So
Yeah, no, it's a level of player entitlement that you can run into sometimes, and I think that was like I joke about fourth edition on the show from time to time. Look, I've played original, I played basic, I played first edition, AD&D, third edition, 3.5, Pathfinder, fifth edition. They've all got good stuff in them, And you notice the fourth edition is not in that list. I remember looking at the fourth edition books, and it just chance happened that when I opened it, I got to a place immediately that said, let your players give you a list of magic items they want, and then do everything you can to make sure they get those magic items if you don't just give them to them outright.
that's super weird, right? I mean,
yeah. I was like, who are you people? What is
yeah,
this nonsense?
it's really strange. And
And it sounds to me like you ran into somebody who was tempered by that mindset.
yeah, well, it was a little bit more that he wanted this story moment for his character, right? It was not so much power gaming, but he wanted the story moment. But the mindset was definitely he can make such suggestions and expects them to be heeded. And I mean, it's a fine line. You wanna take player input and wanna enable them, right? In the end, what we try to do with the old school style is to provide freedom to the players, but freedom through a consistent reality that we try, or not reality, but a consistent fantasy that we try to emulate, right? Or try to present this living world. This is the freedom that gives them their enjoyment. That's what our hope is. But they want it all, ordered. But I don't even understand. Even if I did what he wanted, where would the fun be for him? I don't get that part, right? I mean, I sort of get the idea. Okay, I get the power gaming items that I need. Well, yeah, fair enough. But I don't even understand where the story fun is if I just can order it like a pizza. That was sort of weird.
Yeah. I've been kind of fortunate in that I haven't really run into that. I've had people say, I hope that my character can do X. I hope that they get up to level Y. But I haven't yet run into the whole, I really want, a note saying, I really want this thing. Here's all this stuff I wrote about what's going to be awesome when I get this thing. And please change it so that I get this thing. Oh, and also here's more details, and you should change the thing to be this. Like, I can honestly say I have not run into that. So you've got one up on me there.
Yeah, but he was a decent guy otherwise, right? So
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, you ran into a little bit of entitlement, but not fun wrecking entitlement. Not.
No, but he didn't show up again, right? So he played the
Ah,
session, and then so as you said, the punitive game, there's also people who don't like that. Also, some people who dropped out of the living campaign because it was too cutthroat for them. So
Mm.
there were some people who were like, okay, we don't care for X and Y. We need to get the loot for the night, right? And
Yeah.
this jarred some people. So let's just wanted to be honest about that. That's this kind of play is not for everybody, and this is not necessarily um, that those people who don't like it are bad players, right? So it's just some, you get XP for gold. So there's some that's a mechanic that is not for everybody, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And I feel like it's better to be upfront with like, when I say I have 11 people in my Monday night AD&D game, if 5 of them in various fashion told me we're not digging this isn't for us, I would not coerce. I would have a talk with them. I'd find out if there was like one thing that I was doing. If they said like the break at 11:30 is just too distracting, can we not do that? Okay, all right. But if they were like, look, I'm just not digging it, when you said a fantasy game, I was like, it's going to be like Lord of the Rings. This is not. um if for whatever reason it's not working for 1, 2, 5, or a half dozen players, I would rather they leave saying they enjoyed what they enjoyed and go on, rather than try and coerce them into staying, warping my game to get them to stay, and ruining everybody else's fun by saying, well, we're going to change things up a little bit and make it so that this one person's desires are met so they'll keep coming back. Because then you're saying to the people who are there for what you're bringing, you guys, your opinions don't really matter that much. I'm more interested in a body count. I'm more interested in attendance than I am getting, getting the message across. And it's like this show. I've said if I had one person, if there was one person who watched this live stream and they enjoyed it and they said, please keep doing your live stream, I would do my live stream for them. I'm very lucky in that I have more than one person. But I guess what I'm saying is, and what I think I'm picking up from you is that it's better. It's better if the people who are just not feeling it, if they go on to their own thing.
Yeah, I would think so, because the other playstyles, the other ways of accommodating people in D&D, they exist, right? And then if we change the things that are peculiar and special about first edition and that are important, right? I don't need. I mean, what did I find out recently? I didn't even know that rules as written, dwarf women can't get percentile strength as fighters, so I can drop this rule and don't change. So
Yeah.
I would want it, so I never differentiated, right? So
Right.
male, female, I don't care. Everybody gets the same attributes. And I think my car even says this, so he might even not have known this rule is somewhere hidden. But the core of first edition is the world is not about you, right? You have to
Right.
make your way in the world, and you have to be careful to get the treasure. And if you're not a little bit greedy, you will not be successful in that game. And if you don't like that, there's many other versions of D&D that accommodate you, but we need to keep this one alive, and well, not pure, but working condition. In the engine needs to be running, and so that I see this as part of our task to keep that version and that vision of D&D, of AD&D, alive, so that other things, good things, can come from it, and even if it's only in comparison, right? So that it's still there. Uh, to go back to and look at it. And otherwise history gets lost, and this practice gets lost, and at some point everybody expects a 4-person group with 10 pages of background and a lot of jokes told to a non-existing camera, right? So I've seen sessions where the people act as if they were on a stream, which they aren't, and there's no camera, but that's how they learn the game. And this has its own value, I guess, but it's not everything. And
you won't find much disagreement with that opinion here, and I think perhaps we'll save for another discussion my opinion on a certain extremely popular D&D live stream. But I think you make a good analogy about cars. Like if you got a classic Chevy Bel Air, something like that, there are parts of it that it just doesn't make sense to try and keep original. But at the same token, somebody that comes along and says, sweet, where are the air conditioning controls? Where's the surround sound system? Is there a DVD player built in the seat so I can watch a movie? Do you have Bluetooth so I can just hook up my phone and we can hear my tunes? Does it have an EFI and a turbocharger? Well, no, it doesn't have any of those things. What it has is style and class, and you can get from the same place that you are now to where you want to go and look good doing it and preserve history. But again, you don't seek out leaded gas to put in it. You don't try and buy an inefficient battery made the same way they made batteries in the 1950s to put in it. You put a modern 12-volt battery that'll last 5 years in a car in it. That's what preservation of D&D now is, of AD&D. And thank you very much, Volcano God, for the super chat. Just showed up. What up, AD&D rules, right? Absolutely. That's what we're here for. That's what we're here about. You keep the engine going in the classic way, and you use modern parts where it makes sense to, right?
Definitely.
So I think we're on the same wavelength there.
And another simile or analogy that came up to me when we were discussing half an hour ago, and I forgot to mention it, that I think what to stay in the 80s, I think what the Gary way of writing and doing is, you did this explanation that you had to navigate the DMG, right, and the text, that they are like a cavern that needs to be explored, and then there's a treasure in the end. That's what was your your picture, right? Your image that you painted. What I was thinking of when you were saying this, in a way, the Gary first edition way is sort of like the Miyagi-Do, right? From the Miyagi way of karate, right?
Yes.
You have to. I only know the German versions. Where he has to clean the cars and do all this repetitive
wax on, wax off.
Yes, wax on, wax off. Exactly, and that's sort of how I think first edition is in comparison to BX. BX is maybe more like Cobra Kai, right? So to go in and start playing and hit them, but in the end, we know in the long run, it's better for you and everybody else, and for the for stability, and the bigger powers lie with the Miyagi way, right? So that's I really believe that's the whole experience of 5 years or 5 years, I think, of DMing OD&D in his basement with like 40 players, and that's crystallized in first edition AD&D. That's really the treasure that you can gain, or the secret technique, the one-legged kick, or whatever you can really gain from that. So it needs to be kept and carried over into two different people, right? So yeah, I think everybody who's engaged in that is doing something very worthwhile.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I will say that your Karate Kid analogies have probably resonated very well with my buddy Volcano God. He's a personal friend of mine, um, and not just because he super chatted me either, audience. But you want to talk about a huge fan of Karate Kid? It's this guy right here, Volcano God. So yes, it's he says sweep the leg is the only way. Strike hard, strike fast, no mercy.
Well, BX is not all bad. Can do stuff.
Indeed, indeed. I'm of the mindset. If somebody come to me and said, "Hey, will you run a D&D game?" Sure. Well, our favorite D&D is, Molde Basic. I'd run it. I mean, I won't break out in hives if I handle basic D&D, guys. All right, I'm not that much of a grog nerd. But yeah, it's really about keeping the fundamentals alive. And you, by all accounts, I mean, you've got your. I'm gonna go back in here. I'm gonna put this up real quick again. You've got your live stream show here, and that does have. You said that does have some English episodes.
Yes. We have English interviews with Gabor Lux, with the Prince of Nothing, with Patrick Stewart, which maybe I don't know if you're interested in that, but and with Trent, and I hope maybe we can get Carrie later on. So that's. Did I forget somebody? Yeah, Gene. We have a big ass interview with Gene Weigel. So
I have heard about the big ass interview with Gene. I have not dived into that one. But you have your zine here now that is that is all in German language, correct?
It's all in German. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, but
Well, that's okay. Hey, you know what? I think it would behoove our friends out there who perhaps are thinking of picking up a second language. Look, guys, Set has gone through the trouble of not just learning English, okay? First of all, you speak English better than a lot of English speakers that I know. Second of all, this guy learned English so he could understand High Gygaxian. You could do yourself a little bit of a favor and maybe sit down one night with Google Translate and their zine and check that out. I think you could do a lot worse than that. So what's coming up in the future? What's down the road? You got any big projects in the pipeline?
Well, as I said, and then the next episode is in next episode. The next episode of the podcast with English language hopefully is with Calry. So that would be very nice if we can get him on. Then the next zine will have all original new content. There will be for about fifth level fifth level module where a city is it's sort of plays in Greyhawk. I think it's not by me. It's a city that is surrounded by orcs, but also there's sea elves that have some mystery going on. And I've actually played this in the playtest as a player, and we burnt the whole city. That's a good one.
Like you do.
But they killed my how you call it, my familiar, right? My mage familiar. And so I was really pissed and annoyed by those guys. But it's very very nice. So and there will be the German version of the Dust and Stars module that won some acclaim with the No Art Punk contest. And that's coming up in the issue after that. There will be some higher level module. And this is in the works. I'm writing something that is trying to accommodate players at name level. So the thief gets his thieves guild, and the mage gets his
Wow.
tower, and there will be armies, and there will be but you're the first time that I talk about it, so let's not spoil it. But
Exclusive to the Deller's Dungeon. Thank you so
yes,
much for dropping that out there.
yeah,
Now, and this is, AD&D published modules. I don't consider Throne of the Bloodstone. I mean, that's just kind of a silly lark. But really, there's only a couple, 2 or 3 classic AD&D modules that even come close to dealing with the level of campaign you're talking about. So that sounds phenomenal, and I'm really, really looking forward to seeing that. And again, I will avail myself of some Google Translate. So you let me know when that drops. You can come back when that one rolls out. I think maybe
yeah.
we can discuss that.
I will make this available in English too, because I think it's that should be nice for the community. Yeah, and we try to do a convention for old school D&D. But well, let's see. Maybe next year. I think it's realistic.
Now we have we have a virtual con coming up, the Great Underground Online Gaming Convention.
Yes, please. I couldn't log into. I logged into it, but I didn't see any. Just some pictures, and I couldn't really make heads or
Okay,
tails.
so we have kind of a temporary thing over on a website called Band. Let me see if I can find that link for you real quick here. I'll put it up in the chat. But we got to have an organizational meeting. Myself and Boganora, who's working on who's working on that side of it. We're gonna get that set up real soon. But if you guys want to check this out real quick, so I'd love it if you could come and play in some games we're going to have going, or run some games, because God, it sounds like you've got a hell of a dialed in DM technique. I would play in a game you ran.
Thanks.
So yeah, that would be awesome. It's over in the chat, guys. I'm not going to put it up just at this minute because we do have a question here, and I'll let you answer this one. We'll maybe wrap this up because, good Lord, it's 3:00 in the morning where you are. It just occurred to me. I'm a horrible host. People have regular lives beyond talking about D&D. Bill, please try and think of that. Volcano God wants to know, did you do the interview with Gene Wheel?
Yes, I did.
Now, Gene now lives in my neck of the woods. I just want to point that out. But go ahead.
Yes. I hope you guys can meet. That will be like awesome. Yes, we did the interview, and it was a little bit, sorry to Gene, but it was a little bit like herding cats. Because he likes to, like a cat, good cat does, he likes to stray off, right? And he makes references to things that one really needs to try to catch, so that the audience still knows what he's talking about. But he's so quick in the mind, right? And wow, he's just a great person, and in a way he's a character, of course, but he has been such a great influence to me and others I know. Back then, I think 2008, when he dropped this series of videos that was like super awesome. Just that, to me, he's like the Big Lebowski of AD&D gaming. He's the dude, right?
Well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Yes. It is. Yes.
All right. Oh, Volcano God has heard that one. He says he loved that interview. So,
Thank
God,
you.
I'm just gonna keep you coming back on the show. You're stuck here now. You realize that, like,
right.
I need somebody to talk about. I'm losing focus. I gotta have somebody to keep it real on the show. I'll invite Seth. But no, seriously, I would love to have you back soon. To talk about your other projects and such. So I thank you so much for coming on the show, for staying up at an insane hour now, because again, now it is actually late where you're at. Anything in parting? Anything you want to wrap up with?
No, just, well, thanks for having me. Thanks for, being part of this community that keeps First Edition alive. And we love you guys from Cobra Kai, right? From the BX tribe. We also love you. But
Right on.
Gary Doe is the way, though.
Gary Doe. All right, man. Listen, you have an absolutely wonderful. Get some sleep. Get some sleep. I've wrecked you, so y'all take a nice long nap now, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Okay, man.
Okay, and I'll try to catch some of your modules because I've been lacking in that regard. I'm sorry about that. So I've got to catch some of those.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, brother. All right. Have a good evening, Seth.
Same to you. Bye-bye.
Peace. And that was Settembrini, and I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. I want to take a hot minute here real quick before we wrap up this evening. Luther Pendragon is accusing me of German collusion. Well, if it's that kind of German collusion, then brand me a colluder. A super colluder, if you will. Put me in a mile-long loop and whip me around till I come back to AD&D. But as always, I do want to take a moment here, as you guys have been seeing. If you want to support the show on Subscribestar, or if you want to support it on Patreon, you can do either. Just follow the linky dinkies down there. But there are some folks who do, and I want to take a moment to thank them now. Thank you to Digital Discord, Joshua Garlock, Lord Corion, Ricky Maru, Mobius, Kevin Reynolds, Doomsword Deathmaster, Mark Simpson, Damien247, James F. Keck, William Smith, The Dungeon Minister, Manny Wall, Mark Corey, Kevin Wood, Todd Sharp, Carnivore Farmer. Ooh, that sounds like a creepypasta video game. Rob can't say the rest of that or I'll get demonetized. Ulysses, Jeremy Rule, and Bo Ganora. And guys, if you're on Subscribestar, please remember, until I get 5 subscribers on Subscribestar, they don't turn on auto pay. So you got to go in every month and you gotta hit the yes pay button. So I'm not like, give me your money or anything like that. I'm just letting you know. I'm just letting you know that that's from, why they didn't tell you. Why they like, oh, by the way, can't engage auto pay. Like with that they should have told you that, not me. But anyway, or both of us. But be that as it may, just letting you know. So thank you once again, everyone, for being here. Wasn't that an awesome interview? I wish I could have that guy on every other night. The gaming scene in Berlin. Oh my God, I'm green with envy. Not just green with the lights you get from LEDs. So I'm going to go and have some dinner now. It was a great show, Vizwiki. Maybe he's a wildlife photographer and misspelled carnivore framer. I like that, hijinks. I like that. It was a great interview, Joshua. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you guys did too. Tomorrow night, we're back with some Gamma World. We are back with some Gamma World tomorrow night. That's right. The radioactive waste, they're calling to you. Then Monday, we're going to come back and we're going to get back to, again, the Giants. That's right. G3, Hall of the Fire Giant King. You guys think that the descriptions I've been giving of G1 and G2, that these are tough, long slogs of combat, of creepy, magical weirdness? Oh, kids. If you've not seen G3, strap in. It's a real mind scrambler. Listen, you guys have an absolutely stellar evening. I'll see you tomorrow. And from then on. And if I don't see you tomorrow, have an absolutely fantastic Easter weekend. Be safe. Take care.